Episode 8, Xin Haoyue. What did she do to deserve that? If not for her and her mother, my mother wouldn't have thought of committing suicide by overdosing on sleeping pills. Chen Xinan, I should have been able to enjoy the love of my parents and have a happy family, but she ruined all of that. Chen Xinan sneered contemptuously. What's so funny, Chen Xinan? You're only making selfish excuses for your own misdeeds. You couldn't find a way to vent your pitiful life, so you pushed all your anger towards her, because you thought she was an easy target. You say she took away everything from you, but shouldn't everything you mentioned have been hers in the first place? Chen Xinan reminded her. You and your mother are the ones who destroyed a happy family. I think hell would be a much more suitable place for someone like you. After saying that, he stood up. After having her wound pried open, she howled. No, no. My mother and my father are the ones who were truly in love. Xin Haoyue's mother is the one who broke them apart. Chen Xinan didn't feel like discussing this ridiculous issue with her. Whether what she said was true or false, she herself knew. When she saw him turning around to leave, she quickly yelled, Chen Xinan, Xin Haoyue won't be alive for long. As long as your children are alive, she'll never be able to live long. Chen Xinan, if you kill your child, then Xin Haoyue will be able to survive. With a snort, Chen Xinan left without even turning back to look at her. Who on earth would believe nonsense like that? Only, after he returned home, he could clearly sense that Xin Haoyue was getting more and more uneasy. Occasionally, whenever she took any naps or slept, she would be woken up halfway from a nightmare. After waking up, she would gasp heavily in a daze. Chen Xinan would find her with the same sweaty and tense appearance every time. Grabbing a tissue, he helped wipe the sweat off her face and spoke in a gentle voice. Nightmares again? Xin Haoyue nodded. I dreamt about the past. She seems to be reliving all those experiences in the past in her dreams all over again. All the disappointment and heartbreak was so real that she could hardly differentiate them from reality. Chen Xinan, don't worry, it's just a dream. If I'm not by your side anymore one day, then you and our child. Don't talk nonsense. Xin Haoyue put on a smile and changed the topic. We haven't named the baby yet. For a boy and a girl, we'll give both of them names. What do you think? But in fact, the elders have already long begun thinking up names for them early on, but they couldn't find anything that satisfied them. Chen Xinan held her softly and nodded. All right, we'll give a name for both the boy and the girl. If the first one is a boy, we'll keep the other name for next time. Yeah, that'll be nice. You should name the baby. All right. After agreeing, Xin Haoyue slowly closed her eyes again and nestled into his arms. Perhaps those dreams were telling her that it's time to go back. But in the end, Chen Xinan still managed to comfort her. Since the heavy rain went on for 2 entire weeks, the news reported that floods raged through many places and houses were collapsing because of it. It was a huge disaster. Every time she saw the news, Xin Haoyue would feel more and more uneasy. The moment she first felt her labor pains was during an afternoon of heavy rain. Around 3 o'clock that day, she laid down and rested for less than a few minutes before something felt wrong. At first, it was only a faint throb of pain, but the throbbing came more frequently and the pain intensified. Xinan. As soon as Chen Xinan, who had been staying at home with her during her near-labor days, heard that something was off, he quickly came over. Honey, Xin Haoyue held her stomach and said through gritted teeth, I think it's about to come out. When he heard that, Chen Xinan's face changed instantly. He carried her up and quickly called Wang Yinlin to rush to the hospital with him. It was raining too heavily, so Chen Xinan thought he would tell old Grandpa Chen to just wait at home for the good news. However, he would have never expected that Chen An and the 2 elders of the Xin family would rush over as soon as they arrived at the hospital. How is it? What's her condition? Old Grandpa Chen quickly asked. While he was rushing there, Chen Xinan felt like his heart was stuck at his throat. Never in his lifetime had he ever experienced such panic. He was worried that an accident would happen, and that he wouldn't be able to protect the single most important person in his life. Chen Xinan took a deep breath and tried his best to calm himself down. Everything would be fine, he told himself. Both of them will be perfectly fine. When Wang Yinglin heard old Grandpa Chen's question, she quickly responded, the doctor says she's in labor, and the baby is in the right position. Everything will be fine. Yeah, that's a very blessed child. Everything will definitely be fine, Chen An chimed in. Only those at the scene knew how long the wait was and how grinding it felt to wait. Even until night fell, the rain still didn't stop. Chen Xinan stood at the door to the delivery room and looked at the closed door that was silent. Only, everyone else there could clearly tell that his expression grew worse and worse with each passing minute. Binding knew that he was worried, and though she herself was extremely worried, she still tried to comfort him. That's how it's like for a woman to give birth. This is Haoyue's first birth, so it's normal for it to take longer. Everything will be fine. I know, Mom, Chen Xinan answered haggardly, but his eyes never left the door. God knows how much time had passed, but the tightly shut doors were finally open. The doctor walked out and smiled. Congratulations, it's a fat little boy. Doctor, how is my wife? Chen Xinan asked hurriedly. She's fine. She just finished giving birth and only managed to take one look before passing out. Without speaking another word, Chen Xinan rushed into the room. The dense smell of blood came gushing into his nose, and he could hear the sound of a child crying loudly. Chen Xinan froze for a moment. Wang Yinlin and Bai Ning followed him in. As soon as they saw the little baby in the nurse's hands, they all observed him with pleased smiles, saying, "They look so alike." Chen Xinan had only taken a quick glance at the baby before rushing over to the bed. Xin Haoyue's face was completely ghastly pale as she lay on the bed while sweat drenched her hair. Her hands were still tightly clenched around the bedsheets, and her brows were furrowed, but she was deep asleep. Chen Xinan felt his heart ache as he reached out to open up her clenched hands. He lowered his hand to land a soft kiss at her palm. "It must have been hard on you, honey." However, Chen Xinan would have no idea that Xin Haoyue would end up sleeping for a long time without waking up. Miraculously, the distracting and disastrous rain gradually stopped when dawn came. Light poured down from the sky, glowing dazzlingly through the dense clouds. "Honey, honey, wake up. Siwei, wake up, please wake up, honey, please, Siwei." What are those overlapping voices? Who do they belong to? Chen Xinan? Besides his voice, she seemed to be able to hear someone else she knew. "Doctor, please take a look. Is my daughter waking up soon? Doctor, she can wake up, right? I just saw her eyelashes and finger move." "Doctor." That voice? Mom? Xin Haoyue suddenly remembered. It's her mother. It's really her. But why was she here? She opened her eyes, only to be greeted by the feeling of her sinking into darkness. This place was completely devoid of light. She wanted to get out of the darkness, but for some reason she couldn't walk forward no matter what. It was dark everywhere. Where should she go? The patient's situation is really very rare. The unfamiliar voice of another man could be heard. Following that, a beam of light suddenly flashed into the darkness. Xin Haoyue raised her hand up abruptly to block the dazzling ray of light, but found her body falling backwards. When she regained her awareness, she happened to find that the source of the beam of light from earlier was the doctor dressed in his white coat. He was looking down and checking her eyes. "Seems like she's woken up. This is truly a miracle. It's surprising that she can wake up even after being in a coma for a month. It's a cause for celebration." The doctor breathed a sigh of relief. After hearing that, Xin Haoyue heard a familiar voice by her ear speaking with excitement. "Thank you, doctor. Thank you. Really, thank you so much." "Mom." Only when she tried to speak did Xin Haoyue realize that her voice was incredibly hoarse and also very weak. Mother Xin wiped her tears with excitement. "It's good that you've woken up. That's good. Thank goodness you're awake." "Mom, Yue, don't talk. You just woke up. Mom will go and buy you some porridge, so you should go take a good rest." Then, without waiting for a response from Xin Haoyue, she left in glee. Xin Haoyue's expression was solemn. She turned her head to look around her, and it wasn't hard to see the long history of this small ward. The paint had rubbed off on the corners of the table next to the bed, and the windows were also slightly worn. Xin Haoyue raised her hand and touched her stomach. It was completely flat without any of the so-called post-labor pains. She couldn't help but reach out and cover her own eyes. So does that mean that she returned? Where's her baby? Where's Chen Xinan? Where's everyone? Xin Haoyue could no longer tell the difference. Were those fantastical memories of the past just vivid dreams, or did they really exist? Would she be able to go back by closing her eyes so that she could go back to when she gave birth to her baby? Her baby? That inexplicable sense of pain. Xin Haoyue had just shut her eyes and opened them again quickly after. No, those aren't dreams. She and Chen Xinan had a wedding together, and they had a child. Those really happened. Xin Haoyue quickly climbed out of bed and had just taken a single step. She didn't expect her legs to be completely powerless, and she immediately fell beside the bed. She was splayed on the ground and tears suddenly dropped from her eyes. Why? Why? I can't go back anymore. I really can't. What about Chen Xinan? What about the baby? She only had time to take one look at her baby, and she couldn't even remember what he looked like. She didn't even manage to hold him once. That's right, she didn't even have the time to tell Chen Xinan the name she thought of for their child. But there were no more chances. It was too late for everything. "Oh gosh, Yue, what are you doing? Quickly get up." Mother Xin, who had just returned from buying porridge, came in to see her sobbing on the ground. And the sight of her pained cry made her eyes redden as well. "You silly child, what are you crying about after you finally woke up?" "Mom," Xin Haoyue hugged her, and it felt more and more difficult to suppress her emotions. "Mom, my baby, I can't go back anymore. I can't go back." "What baby? It's fine. It's fine. Don't cry. We'll have to thank the heavens that you finally woke up. Nothing else is important anymore." But Xin Haoyue could only think about crying. Besides crying, she couldn't find another way to vent her emotions. Xin Haoyue cried for a long time and finally stopped when her eyes were swollen. If not for her worrying that her mother would hurt herself from crying with her, it might have been difficult for her to stop. "Mom." Xin Haoyue looked at her mother, who seemed to turn older all of a sudden, and for a moment she didn't know where to begin. "You've cried for so long that you must be hungry. Have some porridge." When Xin Haoyue saw her busy herself with feeding her, her eyes couldn't help but swell with tears again. "Mom, I'm sorry." Silly girl, why are you apologizing? I'm really sorry, Mom. She lived such a happy life in that world, but left her only loved one alone in this world to wait on painfully. Mother Xin saw how she kept acting so off, and though she had no idea what happened, she was worried that asking her now would make her even more sad, so she could only say, Mom will be happy as long as you're well. Nothing else matters anymore. No matter how hard life is, or how poorly we have to live, we can still make it through. Mom, I'm sorry. The only thing she could say was sorry. Xin Haoyue was discharged the next day despite Mother Xin's attempts to dissuade her. She had already found out last night that it had been more than a month since she fell down the stairs. Since she was admitted to the hospital after someone discovered her, Mother Xin had helped her transfer to several different hospitals many times. Many doctors say that though she still had life left in her, the chances of her waking up were very low. But Mother Xin always believed that she would wake up. She sold her mortgage and ran around everywhere, just in hopes that she could wake up. Xin Haoyue walked out of the hospital while pulling along her luggage. When she looked up at the golden glow of the sun, she knew that life would only get harder. But now that she's back, what else could she do besides gritting her teeth and living on? She searched online for a long time and finally found a 2-room house. The price was very cheap, and from what she could see, besides the house being a little small, everything else was acceptable, so she rented it. Mother Xin's body was sickly, so Xin Haoyue had her stay at home to rest while she went out to look for a job. Their new apartment was very simple. Even though Xin Haoyue wasn't very happy with it, she was helpless to do anything. She also called the school after she was discharged to see if she could get her job back, but the director could only answer with hems and haws. Mostly, it was because her teaching license was about to expire. Xin Haoyue had no intention to continue working as a teacher, so instead, she focused on finding a job as a host. Without any background or connections, as well as not having the certifications, the road to look for a job was very bumpy for her. After seeing that she was receiving no news, even after a week had passed, Xin Haoyue was forced to send in her resume to a company as a clerk. After the interview, her admission notice quickly arrived. When she first began working there, Xin Haoyue found a small children's training center not too far from her workplace that happened to be recruiting dance teachers. Xin Haoyue spent more than 2 weeks working hard to strengthen her body and working up her basic dance skills. Unexpectedly, she received great praise when she went in for the interview. After discussing with the person in charge and signing the contract, she walked through the bustling streets with a black umbrella in her hand and her heart feeling heavy. Everything that happened today was nothing more than confirmation that what she went through in that book was all true. She had learned how to dance, she learned how to host, and she even had people she once loved. Even if she wanted all of that back, she had nowhere to begin. Xin Haoyue felt like a lonely, wandering soul in this world without any sense of direction. In front of the crossroads, the red numbers lit up. Just like the countless others waiting with her, she stared before her in a daze. Who knows how many times those blurry numbers changed as Xin Haoyue suddenly looked up. She noticed a bookstore at the right-hand side of the intersection in front. The glass doors of the store were closed and opened again. After opening again, the door was shut again by the person who just left. The green numbers had already appeared for some time and someone suddenly bumped into her from behind. She quickly stabilized herself and came back to her senses. When she looked up again, her eyes were right on that bookstore. Then, moving her legs, she quickly strolled towards the store. Even after searching for a long time, Xin Haoyue couldn't find the book. After asking the clerk and finding out that Confident Wife of the President wasn't sold there, her eyes dimmed for a few seconds. Then, she turned sharply and headed for the next bookstore. All the way until nighttime, she visited bookstore after bookstore. But unfortunately, all the shops told her, sorry, our store doesn't carry that book. Xin Haoyue headed back dazedly to the small apartment where they were staying. Mother Xin was weaving something underneath the dim light. Mom, why don't you turn on a brighter light? I can see fine. Don't worry. This is more energy efficient. Xin Haoyue suddenly felt a sour taste in her mouth. Slowly, after that choking feeling disappeared, she spoke. Mom, your eyes aren't good. You should stop. I'm fine. Mother Xin stood up and was just about to ask whether she had eaten and suggested heating up some food, but she noticed that her clothes were half drenched. She quickly asked, why are you wet? Didn't you bring your umbrella? Xin Haoyue lied. The rain was a bit heavy. Mother Xin quickly handed her a towel. If the rain is too big next time, then you can just come home a bit later. He just recovered. What are you going to do if you get sick again? Xin Haoyue forced herself to put on a smile. All right, I'll remember that next time. I'll go take a shower first, Mom. Quickly go. Xin Haoyue went back into her room, and after shutting the door, she let her body slide down to the ground like a sunken pit, and her eyes were empty. They didn't have the book. None of them did. Could that really have been all just a dream? Xin Haoyue suddenly thought of something, and quickly went on Baidu to search up the title. Then, when she saw the familiar names of the male and female lead, as well as the supporting characters in the summary, she couldn't stop her tears from flowing down. Chen Xinan? That wasn't a dream. Xin Haoyue began looking for the book desperately, but strangely enough, it was as if it had disappeared without a trace. She ran through all the bookstores in this entire city, but she got the same response from all of them. Sorry, we don't carry this book in our store anymore. Were the sales of this book so staggering that all of them had been bought? Clearly, Xin Haoyue didn't believe that, until one day, when she posted online to ask for a copy of the physical book, she found out from a response that someone had been desperately wanting to buy the book, besides her. This was how they responded. That's strange. Why is someone asking for that book again? Xin Haoyue was shocked. Who else could it be besides her? Excuse me, may I ask who else is looking for that book? From what I heard, it seems to be the original author. I heard they mentioned that there were flaws with the book that they didn't want to spread, so they bought all the books from all the bookstores and even Taobao. She even bought many of the copies from the readers with a high price. Why? Is there anything strange about this book? Is there a treasure inside or something? That person seemed to take it as a joke. But Xin Haoyue fell into deep thought. The author? She? Xin Haoyue quickly went back to the post to ask if that person had the book or maybe knew where she could get a copy, but that person replied no. I wouldn't read that kind of dog-blood president novel. Then, do you know who the author is? Or her address? I wouldn't know who it is, but you could probably find the address from those who sent the book back. The behavior of the author was really strange. There must be a secret inside that book. Otherwise, why would she be in such a hurry to destroy it? The more she thought about it, the more deeply she believed that it must be so. Could it be that the secret for her to transmigrate back lay inside the book? Xin Haoyue wanted to clear everything up, so for some time she went everywhere to ask about the book or the author's whereabouts. After ending up with 0 clues, Xin Haoyue suddenly thought that if that person hated her so much, then she definitely knew her. However, after checking through all the female friends she knew, she came out with nothing. Until one day, when she went on Weibo and followed the official blog that promoted the book before, she saw the contents of her post and was amazed to find that the author had already passed away for more than a month. The cause of her death seemed to be from a robbery, and she was unfortunately stabbed when she tried to resist and died of excessive blood loss. When Xin Haoyue saw that post, she felt goosebumps rise all over her body. She's dead? So, the author transmigrated in after she died? She was stunned. Then she slowly came back to her senses. She went through the blogger's Weibo, and after going through several pages, found a post about the author. The story of her death was similar, but more specifically, it mentioned that she was writing before her death, and her computer was left on, with handwritten manuscripts scattered all around her keyboard. Also, less than 2 centimeters away from her was an open book, and the page seemed to be stained with blood. Xin Haoyue read word by word seriously, and finally, she felt her temples throbbing painfully. She shut off the computer and massaged her head, feeling disconsolate. So, the author transmigrated after she died? The only similarity Xin Haoyue could find with transmigrating was that it had something to do with blood and a book. So, was blood a vital factor? Why? How could she and the author transmigrate into the same book? Because the author created that world? Because she had the same name as the supporting female character? Xin Haoyue had the vague feeling that she was missing something out. It wasn't until a week later when Xin Haoyue heard her mom mentioning it, did she realize that that scum man also had something happen to his illegitimate daughter some time ago. Xin Haoyue's hatred for that man had never reduced this whole time. Mother Xin had just said a few words when Xin Haoyue cut her off. Mom, can you not mention him? You know I don't want to hear anything about him. Mother Xin's face turned sour, and she said, all right, it's just, I noticed you've been looking up news about some author recently, and from what I heard, her illegitimate daughter seems to be an author as well. An author? So coincidental? Yeah, isn't it? I heard from others that after she was cremated, many of the books that were piled up in her house were burned as well. Some people even said that she must have had all those same books piled up in her house because they wouldn't sell. It's a pity to think about it. Huh? Pitiful? What, were there not many other pitiful people in this world as well? Xin Haoyue was speechless for a moment. Could it really be that coincidental? Then, Xin Haoyue asked for her address before she passed away and went to look for it during her free time at the weekends. After looking around for a long time, she finally found the house where she lived. Only, the house was tightly locked. Xin Haoyue knocked on the door for a long time, but nobody opened the door. Miss, who are you looking for? When Xin Haoyue heard that voice, she turned around to see a haggard old woman standing hunchbacked. Hello, Granny, do you know if anyone lives here? The old granny looked at her and said, nobody's been living there for a long time now. After that strange Shutton girl died, nobody's been here since. Xin Haoyue was stunned in place. After a while she asked, Granny, can I ask you something? I'm just an old woman, I don't know much, but what do you want to know? I just wanted to ask. Xin Haoyue turned to look at the short white house and asked, the person who lived here, was her surname Xin, and was she an author? I don't know if she's an author, but her surname really is Xin. Also, I know that she died a pretty terrible death. But of course, I heard her life was miserable as well. Her mother got involved with someone else's father and gave birth to her, and she seemed to have passed away early on, leaving only her daughter alone. Also, her biological father never came to see her at all. I heard their relationship was also terrible. So, she never came out of her house during the day. Sometimes she would come down for a walk after eating, or you'd see her with her head down hurrying to the supermarket to buy instant noodles. She's a frail young lady with pretty big eyes. Well, they're quite similar to your eyes, but not as bright. She skulks around and rarely makes eye contact with anyone. While talking, the granny tried to recall everything. At the end, she added on, "You know, she's a little strange. One time when my grandson was out for a walk with me after our meal, I saw her brushing by us nervously with her head down. I even called out to her, but then she looked at me in a panic, and then at my son with those bright eyes. Then she ran. It really looks very strange. But I'm not the only person who feels that way. All the other older folks and children feel the same." Xin Haoyue listened to her quietly and immediately affirmed that the author who wrote that book did in fact have some blood relations with her. Only that was not a relationship Xin Haoyue was willing to accept. So the reason she hated her was because of that scumbag? If not for him, then the two of them wouldn't have such broken families today. She hated herself, so she wrote her into the book and gave her everything, only to come to a miserable end. So, was this all just her way of venting? Xin Haoyue suddenly understood something. She understood why she was so crazy now. Because in the real world, her personality and the people she came in contact with, none of them were normal. Xin Haoyue suddenly thought of something and was just about to ask when she heard the deep magnetic voice of a man from behind her. That voice clearly sounded displeased. "Grandma, what are you saying now?" Xin Haoyue subconsciously turned towards that voice and saw a tall, dark figure less than a few steps away from her. That body was slightly thin, and those black clothes were clearly marked with traces of dust and dirt. Xin Haoyue looked up along his clothes until she had a clear look at that face. Then she couldn't help but widen her eyes and her mouth moved. Before she could speak, her tears poured down. Chen Xinan. Those same thick brows, the same deep eyes, and the same tall nose. It's him. It's really him. Tears flowed down her cheeks and she had the instinctive need to jump into her arms. But just after taking a few steps forward, she was stopped by a cold voice. "Please stay where you are, miss. Yes, my surname is Chen, but I'm not Chen Xinan or whatever." Then, he looked at her again and pointed out cruelly, "You've got the wrong person, miss." Xin Haoyue couldn't stop her tears and she looked at her through her blurred gaze, shaking her head hard. "No, you are him. You look just like him. How could you not be him?" But that man looked at him as if she were disgusting and walked past her to help the old woman. "Grandma, how many times did I tell you? Don't talk to strangers. What are we going to do if something happens to you?" That old woman smiled affectionately. "What's going to happen to me? She's just a young lady. What can she do to an old woman like me? Anyway, can't hurt to be a little more careful." After saying that, she helped the old woman back home. When he walked past Xin Haoyue, he looked at her and his gaze looked like he was calling her a weirdo. Xin Haoyue wanted to stop him and ask him a few things, before she eventually stopped when greeted with that cold and distant attitude. Only the granny seemed to be in a good mood. Before leaving, she turned around and asked with a smile, "So? Is my grandson handsome? Everyone who's seen him is filled with praises for him." Xin Haoyue was speechless. That man urged her impatiently. "What are you saying, Grandma? Let's hurry home." Xin Haoyue watched as that figure slowly left, and she still did not look away. He really looked like him, Chen Xinan. Despite knowing that it was just someone who looked a lot like Chen Xinan, no matter how many times she told herself he wasn't Chen Xinan, her stubborn heart refused to listen. Was he really not him? She needed to confirm. Only then could she give up. She couldn't think of any other way to see him again than waiting at the place she first saw him. She had to wait for 3 days before he appeared. Xin Haoyue stood in front of the short white house and waited tirelessly until the streetlights turned on at night. It was then that she saw him. He wore a full black outfit and carried a laptop bag in his hand as he approached. Other than the obvious fatigue on his face, he did resemble Chen Xinan a lot. Xin Haoyue took 2 steps forward, her eyes fixed firmly on his figure. The man had already noticed her. He casually tossed a look at her before walking forward as though he didn't see her. There was no hesitation in his steps. Xin Haoyue stared at him intently. When she saw him walk past her with no intention of stopping, she couldn't help but cry out, "Wait! Did you call me?" When the man turned his head, a trace of displeasure could be seen on his face. "You? If you want to ask if I'm that man again, my answer is the same as last time. Miss, you have the wrong person." Xin Haoyue stared at him and hesitated for a moment before asking insistently, "Do you really not recognize me?" The man curved his lips into a slight smile. "Do you know me? Are you really not him?" "No," the man answered with a sigh. "Miss, that pickup line is so old. You might have picked my interest if you had tried something more original." Xin Haoyue smiled helplessly. "Sorry, I guess I do have the wrong person." After that she added, "You just really look like him." "I might look like him, but I'm not him." He retracted his smile. Miss, the person you love isn't me. Please stop waiting here and go back. Xin Haoyue squeezed out a smile. Thank you. When she turned and left, she shook her head helplessly. She was overthinking. How could he be Chen Xinan? Chen Xinan was in the other world. His life and death were unknown. Xin Haoyue. Even if he doesn't exist in this world, you should still try to live on for your own sake. As her figure grew smaller and smaller in the distance, she didn't know that the man stood in one spot and stared at her for a long moment. When his phone rang, he picked up the call and listened to the other end for a few seconds before suddenly saying, "Have you ever had a strange woman look at you like she was looking at a close lover?" Screw off. I really don't know. I met her only a few days ago. Speaking of, it was pretty weird. When she saw me for the first time, she burst out crying. I felt a little distressed by her tears. Yeah, it is weird. Geez, you're thinking too much. I was moved by her? Please, I've only seen her a few times at most and spoken maybe 5 words total to her. Hey, what are you thinking? Why would I want to pursue her? Plus, she was obviously deeply in love with another man. Why would he go and try to join that party? Although Chen Jinxing was curious about that woman, he knew she only saw him as someone who looked like the man she loved. They were strangers anyway, so there was no reason for him to get involved. Unknowns to Xin Haoyue, Chen Jinxing had actually spotted her every day she waited in front of the White House. His deliberate avoidance, coupled with her absent-mindedness, made her miss him every time. Even from a distance away, Chen Jinxing could clearly see the sadness and loneliness on her face. He wondered, what kind of story did she have with that man? Why did the man leave her? Did he find a new lover? Or did he pass away tragically? Chen Jinxing couldn't think of a reason, and he didn't want to either. However, he didn't think that he would bump into her again, just after a few days. He was casually browsing the shelves in a bookstore and found the book he was searching for at the top of a shelf for architectural books. Just as he grabbed the book and was about to look at its spine for the publisher and date of publication, a flash of white caught his attention. It was a woman's skirt. Skirt? Woman? Chen Jinxing frowned slightly and looked up to meet a pair of hazy eyes. Her again? Before he could open his mouth, he heard her ask in a trembling voice, You know architecture too? Chen Jinxing looked at the book in his hand, then at her expression. She looked like she was about to cry. He paused for a few seconds before answering. What? That man studied architecture too. Why was he so similar to that man? It almost disgusted him. He'd always believed that he was a rather unique person of his own. However, this woman kept on telling him that there was another man in the world who was very similar to him. It was an annoying feeling. Unfortunately, the woman didn't notice his annoyance. She even looked at him with shining eyes and nodded. He's very talented in the field of architecture. Then, she couldn't help but add, even your frowning expression looks identical to his. Oh. Chen Jinxing thought that if he kept talking to her, he would be angered to the point of wanting to strangle her. Miss, do I need to remind you a third time that I'm not him? This time, he could see the lonely expression she was hiding. I know you're not him. He wouldn't treat me like this. He must be waiting for me in the other world, she answered with a self-mocking smile. Chen Jinxing wanted to ask if she needed him to introduce her to a hospital, but she walked away before he could say anything. He couldn't help but stare at her back. Was it because her lover passed away? She became like this because she couldn't withstand the blow? While he was pondering, he suddenly remembered what she said about his frown and quickly relaxed his brows. How annoying! He couldn't be bothered with her. When he went to the front to check out, he saw her talking to the cashier. The cashier shook his head in response to whatever she had asked him. Are you sure? She asked again. I'm sure, miss. There is no record of it. I'm sorry. Oh, no, it's all right. Thank you. When Chen Jinxing saw the lost expression on her face after she said that, he couldn't help but raise an eyebrow. What was she looking for? He waited until she left before going to the checkout. After paying the bill, Chen Jinxing got ready to leave, but turned back around and asked the cashier, Hello, may I ask what book that lady just now was looking for? Oh, yes, she was looking for some CEO novel, but we really don't have it here. CEO? Romance novel? She liked that kind of novel? He really couldn't tell. Thank you. Afterwards, he exited the bookstore and walked a full circle around it. Despite that, he didn't see that woman again. Her eagerness to find such a boring book puzzled him, even though he didn't really care. The next day, when he was going out to eat with a few friends, Fa Xiao placed a hand on his shoulder and asked, So, did you nail that crying girl? Girl? Chen Jinxing answered in confusion. You know, the one you said was crying so hard it made you want to pursue her. Chen Jinxing brushed off his friend's hand and reached for a glass of beer. He took a slow sip before asking leisurely, Are you drunk? Their other friends leaned forward, eager to be let in on the gossip. All of you can stop speculating. He's just spouting pure nonsense, Chen Jinxing said, much to their disappointment. You know better than anyone else whether it's nonsense or not. Fa Xiao retorted. From the way I see it, you've never been moved by any of the girls who liked you before. This time, you felt distressed when you saw a random leaping beauty on the streets. Why don't you explain that then? Chen Xing was silent for a few minutes. It was strange indeed. Due to his handsome looks and cold temperament, growing up, he was often the target of affection for many girls. He also had several girlfriends, but unfortunately, none of those relationships lasted for more than half a month. Mostly because he had absolutely no interest in them. Therefore, he had seen plenty of sad and crying girls. However, he could always watch them cry and mercilessly finish cutting ties with them afterwards. It was really his first time feeling distressed when watching a woman cry. However, he was oddly certain that he didn't like her. So he replied, "Are romantic emotions that superficial? Falling for someone I've met less than a handful of times isn't my style." The group immediately heckled him. "Then Mr. Chen, how do you explain all the girls you've dated?" Chen Jinxing was stunned. He had just slapped himself in the face. After getting his face slapped, Chen Jinxing went home only to find out that there were guests. His grandma refused to move back, saying that she liked the people in the area and was tired of dealing with her son's phony friends. Chen Jinxing and his parents had tried to persuade her multiple times, but the elderly was stubborn. They could only give up. From time to time, they would come to visit her. Eventually, they sent over a reliable nanny to take care of the old woman. It just so happened that his new construction project was being done nearby. Since it was an important project, Chen Jinxing often visited the site in person to survey the progress. During the month he lived at his grandma's house, he never once saw her bring a guest over. When he saw the pair of light-colored high heels in the doorway, he suddenly had a bad premonition. A few days ago, his grandma had attacked him by innuendo and asked if he was interested in any girls. He stood at the entrance and wondered if he should turn around and leave. Alas, before he could do anything, his grandma came out and saw him. "Jinxing, you are finally back. Hurry, grandma has a friend to introduce to you." Chen Jinxing was just about to give an excuse and run when the old lady grabbed his arm and dragged him into the living room. Immediately, he caught sight of a straight, slender back seated in a chair. It looked very familiar. When the woman turned her head, he immediately recognized her. "What a coincidence. Miss, you even managed to find your way to my house." Xin Haoyue looked at him without speaking or moving. What exactly was going on between her and that old lady? When Xin Haoyue was taking the bus earlier, she saw the old lady get on and naturally got up to give her seat. Who would have thought that the old lady would recognize her and grab her hand? "You're the girl who asked me about that strange woman the other day, am I right?" The stunned Xin Haoyue had responded with a little nod. "What a coincidence. The city is so big, yet we still managed to meet again on the same bus." Yes, what a coincidence. She couldn't even explain it anymore. Xin Haoyue could only shift the topic. She asked the old lady why she was riding the bus alone. "I wanted to go to a flower shop to see if they had any of the varieties I want, but I ended up missing my stop. Now, I'm going back." "I see." The old lady noticed that she didn't speak much but continued anyway. "Are you interested in those things? If so, you can accompany me to look at them." All of a sudden, Xin Haoyue was reminded of Grandpa Chen and Bai Ning and ended up agreeing. After accompanying her to pick out a number of plants, the old lady wanted to thank her by inviting her to eat a meal. Xin Haoyue naturally declined. "When you asked me that question a few days ago, I went home and thought about whether or not I forgot anything. 2 days ago, I remembered that a strange young man, surnamed Xin, had also given me a gift. I think it was a book." Xin Haoyue immediately widened her eyes and excitedly grabbed her hands. "Granny, are you telling the truth?" The old woman smiled until her eyes turned into slits. "Of course, but I didn't look at it clearly before I put it away." "Granny, can you lend me the book?" "Of course." Xin Haoyue followed her in a daze, and that was how she inadvertently saw the man who looked like Chen Xinan again. She had spent the rest of the bus ride in an anxious state, wondering what would happen once she saw the book. Never once did she think that she would end up seeing him again. "What a coincidence. Miss, you even managed to find your way to my house." The man's displeasure was clear from the sarcastic tone of his voice. She thought for a moment before standing up. "Mr. Chen, I think you're misunderstanding something. I didn't come here for you," she tried to explain. "Oh, really? Then tell me, what did you come to my house?" Grandma Chen saw the two confronting each other with daggers in their eyes and hurriedly explained. "Jinxing, what are you saying? Miss Xin kindly gave me her seat on the bus and even accompanied me to the flower shop today. I invited her over to have a meal as thanks. Don't scare her away." Chen Jinxing listened to his grandma's explanation, but shot Xin Haoyue a meaningful look. Naturally, she understood his look. She reckoned that in his eyes, she was just another woman desperate to get close to him. Since she couldn't get anywhere with him directly, she decided to go through his grandma instead. However, that really wasn't her intention. Xin Haoyue thought that this meal wasn't important anyway. Her only intention was to get the book. She walked over to Grandma Chen and said politely, "I appreciate your good intentions, Grandma Su. If there's an opportunity in the future, I'll invite you to a meal. For now, could you let me see the book?" Grandma Su wasn't an ignorant person. She could tell that there was discord between the two and didn't dare make Xin Haoyue stay. "Then, you wait here, Haoyue. I'll go look for it." "Thank you, Grandma Chen. Do you want any help?" Grandma Chen hurriedly said. No, you should sit down and have some tea." Jinxing, please help me keep Siyue company. As Grandma Chen made her upstairs, she shot Chen Jinxing a look. Despite feeling annoyed, he nodded. After every 2 steps, she would look back to make sure the two didn't start quarreling. She thought how strange it was. Why weren't they getting along? It was unscientific. Chen Jinxing also felt unscientific. Why was it that whenever he saw this woman, he would feel the urge to mock her? He somehow felt a sense of victory from seeing her aggrieved expression. However, when he thought about it carefully, she hadn't done anything wrong. The most she had done was mistake him for someone else, which made him feel very disturbed. Xin Haoyue sat at the very corner of the sofa and didn't try to break the awkward silence. It was Chen Jinxing, who was standing behind her, who finally opened his mouth after a few minutes. Your name is Xin Haoyue? He heard it from his grandma earlier. She said absent-mindedly, seemingly lost in thought. Seeing this, Chen Jinxing frowned and said, My name is Chen Jinxing. When his words fell, he saw her look at him with a deep stare. Though he didn't know what that look meant, he still explained, I'm not the man you're looking for. Xin Haoyue smiled bitterly. Mr. Chen, I know you're not him. Could you not purposely remind me every time? I might be desperate to find him, but I'm not so desperate that I can't differentiate between the two of you. Chen Jinxing stiffened and opened his mouth to retort, but she cut him off first. I don't have any intentions, nor do I have any interest in you. You don't need to be so cautious. I'm only here to look for a book. That book again? He suddenly remembered what he heard at the bookstore. She seemed to be looking for a romance novel. Was that kind of book really worth all of this effort? My grandma's eyes are bad, so she stopped reading books several years ago. You're here to borrow a book from her? Don't you think that sounds suspicious? He couldn't help but say. Xin Haoyue glanced at him and pursed her lips. Her contempt could easily be seen in that one look, which made him want to yell at her. Fortunately, Grandma Chen came down the stairs just then. She said apologetically, I'm sorry, Haoyue, but I searched everywhere and just couldn't find the book. Xin Haoyue stood up and asked with a tone of urgency, You can't find it? Grandma Chen shook her head. I can't find it, but if you want, I can go look again. Of course, Xin Haoyue didn't dare trouble the old lady any longer. Thank you, but there's no need. It's fine if you can't find the book. I guess it's just fate. Of course, Xin Haoyue didn't dare trouble the old lady any longer. Thank you, but there's no need. It's fine if you can't find the book. I guess it's just fate. Otherwise, why would it be so difficult to find a single book? She couldn't help but laugh at herself. Right. Why was she so hung up on that book? What did she think would happen once she found it? Could she still go back? Would it take her to Chen Xinan? She whispered to herself. How stupid. Raising her head, she looked deeply at Chen Jinxing. If she couldn't see Chen Xinan again in this life, at least his appearance was still etched in the depths of her memories. He would live on forever in her memories. With her. Since the book couldn't be found, Xin Haoyue naturally resigned. Once Xin Haoyue was gone, Grandma Chen couldn't help but whip around and scold her grandson. Jinxing, I know your father and grandfather taught you how to behave like a gentleman. Where did those manners go? Don't forget your name. Your grandfather named you Jinxing in hopes that you would grow up to be a magnanimous gentleman. How could you treat Haoyue like that? Chen Jinxing wanted to refute, being a gentleman? That depends on the person. Unfortunately, his grandma couldn't be bothered with him and left. He stood there and thought for a moment. Although Xin Haoyue had smiled when she told his grandma goodbye, the crushing despair in her eyes was real. Was that book really so important to her? He suddenly ran outside. Xin Haoyue was lost in her thoughts and hadn't gone far. Chen Jinxing caught up with her and quickly grabbed her wrist. Xin Haoyue stared at the gates of the residential area. Then she turned around and saw a crescent moon hanging in the sky. The man's breathing sounded loud in the still night. She looked at him, and all of a sudden, her eyes began to sting. What are you doing? She asked, forcing her tears back. Chen Jinxing didn't know what he did to make her want to cry again, and assumed his grip on her wrist had hurt her. Embarrassed, he hurriedly let go. She stared at him silently, seemingly waiting for him to say something. He carelessly ran a hand through his hair and avoided her burning gaze. What book are you looking for? I'll help you, he proposed weakly. As soon as Xin Haoyue heard his words, her eyes darkened and her gaze focused on something in the near distance. She spoke clearly and coldly, however, a sense of powerlessness could still be heard in her voice. Thank you, but no thanks. I don't think it can be found again. Time after time, she was given hope only for it to be crushed. She had already given up. Chen Jinxing, I appreciate your kindness. I don't think we should see each other again. Stunned, Chen Jinxing blurted out a, why? The moment he said that, he wanted to slap his own mouth. Why the hell did he ask that? Fortunately, Xin Haoyue didn't notice. Only a bitter smile could be seen on her face. Because you look too much like him. And you're not him. Every time I see you, I'm reminded of him again. It makes all of my walls break down. I can't pretend to be strong in front of you. But I know you're not him. You're not him. Chen Jinxing, thank you for existing. Thank you for letting me see him again. If it weren't for the person who came up with the idea to write the story, she probably never would have met Chen Xinan. It didn't matter if everything was just a dream because in her heart, they were her most beautiful memories. If she never met Chen Xinan again in this life, she would find him again in their next life. Chen Junxing stood in one place and watched until her fragile back disappeared into the darkness. Then he turned around and walked back. Why did she thank him? For letting her see the man she loved for the last time? He frowned. He was an only child. His father was a good man and didn't have any illegitimate children. So what exactly was the relationship between him and the man she spoke of? There were so many mysteries surrounding her. He wanted to figure them out, but there was nowhere to start. What made him even more confused was that after she said she wouldn't see him again, she really did completely disappear. Half a month later, he pulled his luggage through the airport, ready to return to his own place. Looking around, she was still nowhere in sight. They were just two strangers pulled together by a mysterious third person. In the end, he didn't see her again. Heh. Fate was strange. Chen Junxing thought that after returning to J City, the possibility of him seeing Xin Haoyue again would be close to zero, but they somehow met again on Army Day. The event planner was one of his old high school classmates. He was getting married and asked Chen Junxing to help him design a house. Chen Junxing rarely took up small projects. At the time, he had laughed and asked, "Your bride sure has guts. She told you to ask me?" His former classmate laughed too. "Isn't it because you're famous? My fiancée practically worships you. She said that if she could live in a house designed by you, she would be able to die without regrets." "You're not annoyed by it?" Chen Junxing teased. "No choice. Who told me to love her so much?" Chen Junxing looked at him contemptuously and said, "If it was me, I wouldn't be able to tolerate my woman thinking about another man. You can say this now because you haven't found the right woman yet. When you do, you'll realize that in front of her, all of your own principles are reduced to dust. I think only you would be so crazy." Instead of arguing with him, his former classmate shifted the topic. "So, are you free enough to help me design a house? I'm begging you." Chen Junxing thought for a moment before agreeing. "All right, I'll do it for you as a wedding gift. You'd better cherish it." "Okay, great, Mr. Chen. I am forever grateful." Chen Junxing laughed and didn't respond. However, when he turned around, the image of that fragile woman surfaced in his mind. Was she still looking for her lover? After completing the design draft, he contacted his former classmate. The wedding rehearsal was just starting. He didn't have time to meet with Chen Junxing to discuss it. Chen Junxing thought about it and said, "Forget it. I might as well play the good guy till the end. I'm going somewhere anyway. I'll drop it off along the way." His former classmate hurriedly thanked him. The government building was a place Chen Junxing couldn't be more familiar with. He'd frequented it with classmates in high school. Every time there was a large-scale event in the city, the venue would be on the 8th floor of the building. There, countless equipment could be found. The stage lighting and sound effects were amazing. It took him no effort to find the rehearsal area. He entered from the main entrance just in time to hear the music inside pick up its tempo. From afar, a slender figure in a white ancient-style dress could be seen. Her long sleeves swept out as she leapt and twirled around. Each of her movements was filled with the distinct grace of a flowing river. For a second, Chen Junxing doubted his own eyesight. Why did that woman on the stage look exactly like Xin Haoyue? He slowly walked closer and sat down in the first row. Only then did his mouth curve into a smile. It really was her. Why did she come to J City? Accident? Coincidence? Chen Junxing felt that it couldn't be explained. Although there were only a few people in the audience, there was a lot of applause. Chen Junxing watched her leave the stage and also stood up. His former classmate saw him then and said, "You're here? Hey, where are you going?" "Hold on, I need to find someone," Chen Junxing shouted while running out. Xin Haoyue was preparing to change her clothes in the waiting room. When she was halfway there, a panting black figure suddenly appeared and gave her a fright. She looked up and saw Chen Junxing's handsome face. The words, "Chen Xinan," immediately sprung to the tip of her tongue, but she swallowed it back. He wasn't Chen Xinan. Realizing this cruel reality, she asked him unhappily, "Why are you here?" Chen Junxing retorted, "Shouldn't I be asking you that? Why are you here?" She walked past him and said over her shoulder, "Don't overthink it. I didn't even know you were in this city." "Oh, really?" She snorted. "Whether you believe it or not is up to you. I just came here to perform." Chen Junxing followed her and stopped in the doorway of the waiting room. She turned around to look at him. That one look bewildered him. "I'm just surprised that you can dance." Xin Haoyue smiled. "Are we familiar? Why are you surprised that I can dance?" Chen Junxing also smiled. "Can we not talk like this?" She fell silent, then responded, "Okay." He continued to stand there without any intention to move. "There are a lot of people inside the waiting room right now. Are you sure you want to stand right here?" "Oh, right. I guess you're busy. I'll look for you when the rehearsal is over," he said awkwardly. "Thank you, but no thanks. We just happen to bump into each other. When the performance is over, I have other things to do." Chen Junxing didn't expect her to refuse so bluntly, but he didn't insist. "Okay, then when you're free next time." Although she didn't know what he was planning, it made her feel a little unsettled. She simply turned around and walked into the waiting room. As she did, she heard someone from outside greet him. "Fancy meeting you here, Mr. Chen. Would you like to come have some tea in my office?" She couldn't help but think, the people here are all rich and influential. Is Chen Zhenxing familiar with them? But it was just a fleeting moment of curiosity. When Chen Zhenxing handed the design draft to his former classmate revealed a look of amazement. Chen Zhenxing was long used to such reactions and directly asked, how was the dancer for the solo performance chosen? Through the audience and judges, of course. Everyone who tried out was required to pass through 3 screenings, so their qualifications had to be high. Chen Zhenxing was silent for a few seconds. His former classmate felt something was off and asked, what, do you know that beauty? No. No? Then why did you go running after her? Chen Zhenxing laughed and didn't refute. He really wasn't familiar with her, or at least, he could tell she didn't want to be familiar with him. Before going back, Chen Zhenxing asked his former classmate to send him a recording of all 3 screening rounds for the solo performance. His former classmate smiled meaningfully without saying anything. Once he received it, Chen Zhenxing replayed the video several times from start to finish before closing the tab. Oh, her movements and emotional portrayal were surprisingly good. The official performance was held at 2:30 p.m. the next day. Chen Zhenxing's former classmate was surprised to see him arrive. Since when were you interested in these things? The man rolled his eyes. I worked day and night on your design draft, and this is how you repay me. Of course not. I'm just curious if you're here to see the beauty. Screw off. What? You took a fancy to her? His former classmate continued to gloat. No one will call you mute if you don't talk, though you're as good as mute even when you do talk. Ha! Now you're acting even more suspicious. Oh right, does your dad know you're here? Is my dad here too? No. Good. Otherwise, his father would start pestering him. Xin Haoyue's performance was 10th on the list. Chen Zhenxing sat in the first row at the left side of the stage and listened in boredom. Oh, the pot-bellied man behind the microphone invited him over for dinner once. The man got drunk and plopped his dirty slippers down on the dining table. Chen Zhenxing had been rendered speechless by his behavior. The rest of the show passed by with him in a daze, even though on the outside, he showed a patient expression. Finally, it came Xin Haoyue's turn to perform. When the lights dimmed, he immediately sat up and fixed his eyes on the white figure on the stage. The spotlight hit her and she began to dance. It was a brilliant, vivid performance of difficult moves and executions. It wasn't until he heard the thundering applause of the audience that Chen Zhenxing broke out of his trance. When did he become so interested in dance? There was one last act with the speakers and performers at the end, so the performers weren't allowed to wash off their makeup or leave early. Xin Haoyue hadn't even reached the waiting room before her path was blocked by someone she didn't want to see. She looked at his white shirt and suddenly fell into a daze. In her memories, Chen Zhenxing always wore black clothes. However, white was Chen Xinan's favorite color for clothing. When he dressed like this, really, he looked just like Chen Xinan. When Chen Zhenxing saw her in a daze, his intuition told him she was thinking about that man again. Xin Haoyue. Huh? Could you not look at me like that? It was really annoying. I'm sorry. She forced her gaze down. She really couldn't help it. Even though she told herself to stop thinking about him, she couldn't. Her mind was constantly filled with thoughts about him. After she was done apologizing, Chen Zhenxing could still see a look of inexplicable sadness on her face. Instantly, he began to reflect. Did he word it too strongly? Before Chen Zhenxing could finish, he saw her raise her head and smiled at him. I know, you're not him. I'll try not to be distracted again when I see you in the future. I'm sorry. Chen Zhenxing's brows raised. He wanted to apologize, but he kept himself from doing so. He really was at a loss seeing her this way. Suddenly, a thought popped up in Chen Zhenxing's mind. After coming to her side, he urged, Quick, change out of your clothes. I'm going to take you somewhere. My work isn't done yet. Didn't you finish your performance earlier? He asked with impatience. Xin Haoyue explained, I still have a group photo session at the end. It's just one group photo. I'll take one with you later. Hey, Chen Zhenxing. All right, stop talking nonsense. Hurry up and go change. I'll be waiting for you here, so chop chop. Xin Haoyue didn't have the time to argue or even any time to refute him before she was pushed into the break room. After changing her clothes and coming back out, Chen Zhenxing looked at her and smiled. And here I was worried you'd coop up in there and wouldn't leave with me. Xin Haoyue looked at him and did not respond, but she asked, So where are you bringing me? You'll know once we're there. Even though Xin Haoyue felt a little suspicious, she still followed him into the car. She couldn't deny it, but it felt like she would only be able to find peace when she was by his side. Almost as if she never left Chen Xinan at all. On the road, Xin Haoyue was looking out the window on the passenger side, letting her mind wander. Chen Zhenxing peeked at her a few times, but he still never got the courage to ask her anything else. As the car pulled up in front of the crowded amusement park, Xin Haoyue opened the door and came out. She looked up, but her eyes were not on the setting sun. Instead, her eyes were instantly fixed on the domed design of the building at first glance. Xin Haoyue's eyes flickered faintly as she turned to look at Chen Zhenxing, who stood beside her. That man was looking around with amusement in his eyes, asking her, How is it? Pretty good, right? This is the most bustling entertainment zone in all of J City. The number of people who come here each day is always in the tens of thousands. Xin Haoyue looked at the building she remembered in her memories, but she suddenly slumped down. Crouching on the ground, she began to cry uncontrollably. Seeing this, Chen Junxin was dumbfounded. Hey, what's wrong with you? I thought you could loosen up if I brought you here and cheer up a little. Why are you crying even worse now? Xin Haoyue raised her head, looking through her vision blurred with her tears this man who was leaning down and showing worry for her. She shook her head. Sorry, I'm sorry. What are you apologizing for? Who designed this place? Where is the designer? Please tell me, Chen Junxin, who is the designer? When he saw her like this, Chen Junxin suddenly thought of something. The tension of his face had completely disappeared. He looked at her and said without any expression, I designed it. He could always answer that question with a radiant smile whenever anyone asked him the same question in the past. But now he really wished this design that received praises from the entire city was not born from his own hands. This bad feeling was too intense. Sure enough, he heard her sob the very next moment. He designed the very same structure in the past as well. It was right after we married, and only agreed to do it after hearing my words. Chen Xinan, why do you and he have so many? But her unfinished words were drowned out by her soft cries. Chen Junxin felt helpless as he watched her cry. He was silent for a moment, but in the end he straightened himself and looked up at his proud work, shaking his head sadly. Why did this happen? Wasn't he just trying to make her feel better? But he didn't expect things to be so counterproductive. The happy fun session he pictured in his mind was a complete failure. After she was done crying, Chen Junxin sent her to a hotel. After stopping his car, he looked at her red eyes and said, I finally understood tonight. What you said at the start was right. It's better for us not to meet. It's the better choice for both you and I. As soon as they meet, she was bound to think of that man and feel sad. He too would feel bad as well. In this case, why should they continue torturing each other? Xin Haoyue, I hope you'll be able to let go soon. Chen Junxin told her that solemnly again. I'm sorry, and thank you. Xin Haoyue said to him with relief. You showed me that there are still people and things connected to him in this world. That alone is enough. Chen Junxin sighed. Then, he watched on as she headed into the hotel. After that, he drove away from that suffocating place. He accelerated his car fiercely, watching car after car pass him by on the road. It felt like something was stuck in his chest. Chen Junxin thought about the whole thing after he returned home, but the more he did, the angrier he felt. After searching on the internet for a long time, he concluded with much certainty that there was no way anyone could build the exact same design as him in this world. That was his own idea, and he poured all his own blood and sweat into it. That was his unique design in this entire world. But why would she say that that man had designed it before? Then where was it now? Chen Junxin looked at the screen, but he couldn't figure anything out, even after a long time. Leaning back on his chair, spinning his reclining office chair every so often, he began to become immersed in his thoughts. As he was deep in thought, his dad that was usually busy during the day and rarely left work early, actually came home early today. It was unprecedented. You're back, Dad? Chen Junxin stood up. Father Chen looked at him with a heavy gaze and said to him unhurriedly, I heard you went to watch a performance today and even brought a woman back with you? Chen Junxin smiled and said, Dad, don't tell me you've got your eyes there too? How did it come out so quickly? Old Liao called me up to congratulate me on whether I'm going to be welcoming a daughter-in-law soon. Did you think I wouldn't know after that? No such thing, Dad. Your daughter-in-law hasn't even appeared yet. Father Chen eyed him down and asked again, So what is your relationship with her? Chen Junxin told him with a serious face, There's nothing between us. Even his father knew about his firm attitude, and he wasn't sure whether he should be happy or worried to hear him respond so determinedly. He never does this, but for the first time he said to his son with a voice filled with sincerity, You're already at that age. If you find yourself a decent girl that you really like, you should bring her back and show her to your mom and me. Chen Junxin didn't know whether he should laugh or cry. When have I ever gotten mixed up with indecent girls? His father glanced at him. You know the history of your own affairs. I don't even know whose genes you inherited, even though your mother and I are so dedicated to each other. Chen Junxin looked at his father who was talking while walking towards the study at the same time, feeling a little helpless. He was clearly very clean and self-respecting. Okay? You need at least a little proof to accuse someone. Seeing that he was left alone in the room again, he thought back to Xin Haoyue's suppressed pained cry from earlier, and he couldn't help but feel troubled. What kind of man is he that was worth her reacting like that? Even if he was curious, he didn't have the opportunity to see her after that. For an entire year, even running to several places and staying at his grandmother's place for more than half a month, she never appeared. Chen Junxin didn't feel good about asking his grandmother, worrying that she might overthink things. Moreover, he didn't want to investigate her in private either. If Father Chen finds out, he might also overthink it, because it hasn't just been a day or two that his elders have been urging him to bring a girlfriend home. When he saw Xin Haoyue again, it was on TV. She was the dark horse in J-City's summer host selection competition, stunning everyone with her outstanding looks, unparalleled eloquence and reflexes, as well as her melodic and moving piano performance. Many people were astonished, and she won as the champion without any suspense. Chen Jinqing suddenly went silent as he saw her in her long, form-fitting white dress, smiling beautifully on stage as she received her trophy. What did she go through this past year? This person seemed to be her, but also different. Her temperament and her expression, they were different from that girl who had suddenly become sad every so often. Chen Jinqing smiled lightly. Has she finally walked out of it? Is she working hard to continue on with her life now? But Chen Jinqing wasn't far off from the truth. Ever since leaving J-City that time, Xin Haoyue spent several days collecting her own emotions. She can't go back anymore, she thought. So, she'll work hard to live her life to the fullest. She will show Chen Xinan, who's still in that world, that even if she has nothing now, she'll still work hard to climb up to a position where she will be able to stand shoulder to shoulder with him. She survived through her toughest days this year. Working 2 to 3 jobs at the same time, she made use of her dancing and piano playing skills, constantly working to improve her financial situation. She even opened a training center of her own and made a name for herself. She participated in countless talent competitions and won many trophies. A month ago, she quit her job so she could focus on preparing for J-City's host selection competition. Nobody knew how much effort and sweat she poured into each level of the competition, but she earned her coveted entry into the industry. She told herself that anything was possible as long as she had the guts to work for it. On the second day after the competition ended, she was able to start her career officially. So she called up Mother Xin to share the good news with her. Mother Xin was also overjoyed. That's good. That's wonderful. It's great that you won. Yeah, Mom, so I won't be able to return for some time. When I have free time during the weekends, I'll go pick you up. You can come stay with me. I've already started looking at some homes. This time, I'll get a bigger and more comfortable house. Yes, that would be great. When Xin Haoyue heard the soft whimper of a sob in her mother's voice, she couldn't help but say, Why are you crying, Mom? I'm just too happy. I'm so happy that I have a capable daughter like you. Don't worry, Mom. I'll definitely work even harder so we can have a better life. That's wonderful. I'm really happy to have a daughter like you. You have to take care of yourself out there. Don't stay up too late at night, and remember to eat your meals on time. I know, Mom. You should take care of yourself too. All right. I still have some work to attend to, so I'll hang up now. Bye, Mom. But Xin Haoyue had no idea that her mother was still holding her phone after she hung up. Tears continuing to fall down her cheeks. It was Xin Haoyue's 4th day at work today. While she was just about to get off, she was stopped by the program team leader from the same show who informed her of a dinner party they wanted her to attend. Xin Haoyue was confused. What kind of dinner party? And why did she have to attend? Just a dinner with some of the chairmen. It's all thanks to their generosity that we can keep the show going, and it just so happens they're all free today. They've already made the arrangements. They're just waiting for us to head over now. Xin Haoyue's intuition told her that it wouldn't be easy to weasel out of this one. So, cautiously she asked, Then, will host Xie and host Zhang be going together as well? Of course, and we'll be running late if you keep asking questions. Hurry, pack up your things and let's go. Xin Haoyue wanted to excuse herself by saying she had something to do, but that person told her directly, And don't try telling me you're not going. Even if you don't go this time, you'll still have to go tomorrow. So hurry up, let's go. When she got on the car, Xin Haoyue couldn't stop herself from feeling uncomfortable. When they arrived at the private room, the sight of the chairmen, who were all over 40 and 50 years old, made Xin Haoyue feel a little disgusted. Looking around, she saw that she was the only young woman in the entire room. When she looked back at the team leader who brought her here, he was toasting everyone with ease. Oh, this must be the new Miss Xin who joined the station, right? She's a real pretty one, she is. The balding chairman, whose name she did not know, was holding a glass of wine while he eyed her lustfully, showing the glass into her hands. Xin Haoyue accepted the drink awkwardly, before distancing herself from him in a casual manner. But in the next second, another chairman leaned in closer and asked with a smile, What brand of perfume is Miss Xin wearing? Even if Xin Haoyue was stupid, it was easy to know that she had ventured into the tiger's den. She smiled and quietly asked the team leader, Didn't you say that host Xie and the others will be coming as well? Oh, they're still on their way. Xin Haoyue's face sank. This was definitely a trap. She was just about to get her bag and leave, but before she could get up, her wrist was caught by the balding chairman and was pulled over by a force she could not resist. Falling to his lap, Xin Haoyue struggled desperately. Oh, look at this. The little girlie says no, but her body seems to say yes. Let's have a kiss and see how sweet these lips are. Then there was a crash. While struggling, Xin Haoyue managed to grab onto a wine bottle and picked it up, smashing it down on that balding head with all her might. Ah! A ghostly cry rang out. Blood! There's blood! Quick, call an ambulance! Catch her! Don't let her run! But how could Xin Haoyue stick around here any longer? After throwing the wine bottle, she immediately ran out. The situation was chaos in the room. It didn't take long after Xin Haoyue left to be chased by a large group of men in black suits. Xin Haoyue waited for a long time, but the elevator wouldn't come. So, gritting her teeth, she ran for the stairs. Only, she bumped into a man as soon as she turned around the corner of the hallway. As soon as she saw that the men dressed in black were about to catch up to her, she was just about to push him away and run. But her wrist was grabbed firmly, and she was pulled into a nearby room. The private room was dimly lit, but Xin Haoyue could still faintly make out the outline of the man's face. Chen Jinxing, why are you here? Chen Jinxing motioned for her not to speak. After the urgent clatter from outside the room ceased, he responded, there was a dinner tonight. Xin Haoyue also understood that the group must have headed in a different direction. She couldn't help but feel relieved. Thanks. Then, turning around, she listened attentively for any movements outside. Aside from a year or two, everything was quiet. When Chen Jinxing saw her reaching for the door, he quickly stopped her. Tell me clearly, what on earth is going on? Xin Haoyue took a breath and said, I just fell for a trap. Chen Jinxing's brows knitted together. And how does that end with you being hunted down with such a large commotion? Xin Haoyue responded helplessly to him. I guess they were trying to pull the unspoken rule thing on me, but I smashed a wine bottle over his head. If they catch me, I'd probably be skinned alive, if I do stay alive. Chen Jinxing held his breath, but his face wasn't looking so good. Xin Haoyue peered at him. This isn't a big deal, really. At most, I just won't be able to stick around in J City anymore. Not like I still want this job anyway. My win is enough to prove my capabilities. That alone is enough. So you're going to just give up on the job you just got? Xin Haoyue responded with scorn. What? And you think I'm just going to stick around for them to get rid of me? If I may be so bold, they don't have that right, Chen Jinxing. I don't need a job that requires fancy rules to climb to the top. Heh, you're still young to the world. Chen Jinxing's face dimmed in a rare sight as he stepped over her and opened the door, saying, I'll send you back first. If you ever find yourself in any trouble in J City, just say my name. I can't guarantee how lucky you'll be with it, but most people will still show some respect to the Chen family at the very least. What's the Chen family's deal in J City anyway? Xin Haoyue asked this question carefully, worried that he would give the same answer she expected. Fortunately, it wasn't. While bringing her downstairs, he said, Well, it's nothing big. We just have some power and some official positions. You know how the rules of the world are. So that's how it is. Xin Haoyue smiled. Yeah, money and power are really handy after all. Chen Jinxing looked at her and finally said, If you ever need it, I'd be very happy if you asked me for help. Thanks, I'm sure I will. Chen Jinxing smiled. Good, I'll be waiting. After sending her home, Chen Jinxing did not leave immediately. He looked up at the lit-up window upstairs while he tapped his slender fingers on the steering wheel. Then, he took his phone out and made a call. Xin Haoyue packed her bags that night itself. When she went to work the next morning, she even prepared her resignation letter, waiting to pass it over when her superiors would criticize her behavior later. But unexpectedly, though she was in fact called to the conference room, there were a few familiar faces present besides Director Zhang, one of which was a fat face with bandages wound over his head several times. Xin Haoyue had the subconscious idea that they must have come to get her to apologize, but the scene was different. Everyone was all smiles and apologizing to her over and over again. Xin Haoyue was mystified. At the very end, Director Zhang also smiled amiably at her, telling her that what happened last night was just a misunderstanding. If she received a shock from it, she could take 2 days off from work and that things weren't very urgent. Xin Haoyue was simply dumbfounded. What's going on? The balding chairman bent over and apologized over and over again. I was really blind last night, Miss Xin. I'm so sorry for rushing into you. Look, this is all just a misunderstanding. If you told me earlier that you were related to the Chen family, then I wouldn't dare to have any ideas, even if you lent me some courage. Huth, you wouldn't dare have any ideas? So are you trying to say that a woman without any money or power is fine then? You really opened my eyes today, Chairman I. It was just a misunderstanding, Miss Xin, Xin Haoyue sneered. It's no longer important whether it's a misunderstanding or not. I think that this is what J-City's TV station is like. Thank you for teaching me. Director Zhang, here's my resignation letter. I hope you can approve it. It's just a misunderstanding, Host Xin. Your resignation, I hope you'll reconsider it. Thank you very much, Director Zhang. I have already made my decision. Seeing her resolution, there was nothing he could do but approve of her resignation. Only, after letting her go, Director Zhang made a call to Chen Jinxing. Xin Haoyue casually packed up her stuff, and after returning home, she went to look at a house. She had already contacted the developer and settled the details with them. Even if she lost the job, she could still find a new one in J City, as the development prospects in this city was quite promising. After she was done checking out the place and feeling that it was to her satisfaction, she was just about to return home and give Mother Xin a call about the construction and designing of the house, to see if she had any opinions before she signed the papers. But unexpectedly, she saw Chen Jinxing's figure as soon as she went downstairs. He was dressed in a white shirt and black pants, standing next to a silver car while his head was buried in thought. All the passersby secretly took a few glances at him when they walked past, but he didn't notice them at all. Xin Haoyue suddenly chuckled and walked to him. When he heard the sound of her footsteps, Chen Jinxing raised his head to see her gazing at him. Looking at her, Chen Jinxing was quiet for a moment. Instead, it was Xin Haoyue who broke the silence with a smile. "Thank you." Chen Jinxing smiled as well. "What are you thanking me for? I know you were the one who spoke up about it. Otherwise, they wouldn't be groveling and apologizing to me today." Chen Jinxing squinted. "And you're so convinced I was the one behind it?" Xin Haoyue smiled. "Yeah, nobody else in this world would do this for me besides you." Chen Jinxing's eyes flickered and he asked, "So am I considered a special and important existence to you now?" "Yeah," Xin Haoyue nodded. "Because you always remind me of him." The corners of Chen Jinxing's mouth rose and he asked, "Are you free? I'll treat you to a meal." "A meal?" Xin Haoyue gave him a puzzling glance. "Chen Jinxing, may I have this honor?" Before Xin Haoyue could respond, her phone rang. As Chen Jinxing watched her pick up her phone, his expression changed faintly. After the call ended, he quickly asked, "What happened?" Xin Haoyue quickly responded, "I'm sorry, I won't be able to have lunch with you. I still have some business to attend to." "You heading to the airport? Need a ride?" Xin Haoyue weighed the situation and nodded. It would probably be a waste of time if she was to hail a cab on her own. After going back upstairs and quickly grabbing the documents, she hurriedly booked a ticket back while they were on the road. When Chen Jinxing saw how pale her face was and how tense she looked, he tried to comfort her. "Calm down. You'll still be stuck on the plane for a couple of hours, so there's no use being so anxious now." Xin Haoyue sighed. "I know, I just can't help it." Why did her mother faint all of a sudden? After parting with her, Chen Jinxing said, 157, that's my number. Feel free to call me if you need any help." Xin Haoyue hurriedly thanked him and rushed to board the plane. At the hospital, it wasn't until she heard everything from the doctor that she finally realized how serious her mother's condition was, and she had no idea this was happening at all. 4th stage stomach cancer. We discovered it too late, so she may not have much time to live even after the operation. After she heard that, Xin Haoyue felt as if she had lost her soul. Back in the hospital room, she looked at the aging and emaciated face on the bed, and she couldn't help but cry silently. So it turns out that she wasn't able to protect her last loved one in this world. Xin Haoyue signed the consent form for the operation. Even though the operation was a big success, her condition worsened just a few days later, to the point where it was out of control. After checking her condition, the doctor shook his head and told her to prepare herself mentally, and also to prepare the funeral. Xin Haoyue's eyes were red. Through the door, she looked in tearfully at her family on the bed, fading a little more each day. Mother Xin knew as well that she didn't have long to live. She would always talk to Xin Haoyue any time she was sober. "Mom felt really lucky in my life too, to have such a filial and capable daughter like you. Mom, the only regret I have is that I wasn't able to give you a complete family. When you went away to study after high school, I would always have a sit in your room any time I thought of you. To be honest, I even snooped through your diary. You wrote that you regretted being born into such a family, that you hated him. But Yue, please don't hate him anymore. For Mom's sake, please. He actually does love you as well. Mom, stop it. Yue, if Mom has to leave first in the future, you have to continue your life well. Find a person who is devoted to you, then get married to him, have kids, live a happy life. Don't worry, Mom. I'll be fine. The only thing I'm worried is that you'll be left all alone after Mom leaves. Don't worry, Mom. I won't be alone. I've already found someone I like. He's a very good person, and he treats me very well. You have to get better soon, Mom. When he's back, I'll bring him here to see you, okay? Yes, that's wonderful. Her illness dragged on for half a month, but they still failed to rescue her from death's hands. Dawn had just come when Xin Haoyue's mom departed. Through her tears, she gave her final goodbyes. It was the day after when Chen Jinxing found out what happened. When he rushed to the hospital that afternoon, he saw her sitting in the hallway right outside the ward, her face lifeless. He paused in his steps. Coming to her side, he sat down. If you want to cry, just cry it out. Xin Haoyue shook her head. No, I've already cried enough since I came back. I want my mom to see me happy. Only then will she be able to leave in peace. Chen Jinxing looked pained at her. He wanted to reach out and hold her, but after his hand hovered in midair, he still decided to retract it and just sat quietly beside her. The funeral was mostly organized with Chen Jinxing's help. When she stood in front of the grave that day, Xin Haoyue, who had long cried her tears dry, stood under the blazing sun. Even when she had gotten dizzy from heat stroke, she was still unwilling to leave. She looked at the familiar photograph and forced out a smile. Mom, you can get rid of your unfortunate fate in this life and move on to a better one. That's good. Find a happy family with someone who will offer you all their heart and soul. Unlike this one. Yue, Papa came to see your mother. The sudden voice of a man caused Xin Haoyue to drown. She turned around to see a man in a black suit and she scoffed. Who are you? You're not welcome here. Yue, are you still angry with Papa? Please, my father has already departed several years ago. The man still wanted to continue, but Xin Haoyue said before him, for someone like you to still be able to live such a glorious life, heaven really is blind. Xin Haoyue, don't call my name, you're not worthy to. After that, Xin Haoyue looked at Chen Jinxing, who had been silent at the side, and said weakly to him, can you give me a ride? Yeah, Chen Jinxing nodded. Before leaving, he took one more glance at the man. So Xin Haoyue and her father had such an explosive relationship. In the car, even if her head was hurting badly, she closed her eyes and said to Chen Jinxing, indeed, we don't have a good relationship. You saw it yourself. I never admitted my relationship with him. Sometimes I even wished he would die. I never thought that things would go so against my wishes. To think a shameless person like him can still live such a good life. Chen Jinxing kept silent. Xin Haoyue continued, I hate men who cheat on their wives the most. And that's not enough for him. He even abandoned his wife. I can't take it anymore. I'm so sorry I'm letting this out on you, Chen Jinxing. No, it's all right. You're just allowing me a chance to know you better. Just sleep if you're tired. I'll wake you up when we're there. Okay. After the funeral was over, Chen Jinxing asked her about her plans after this. When Xin Haoyue thought back to the phone calls asking her about her considerations on the house and when she was going to complete the formalities. So she said, I'm going back to J City. Hearing that, Chen Jinxing looked at her with a meaningful glance. Of course, there was no way Xin Haoyue would not realize that he was no longer treating her as just a normal friend. So she explained, there's no reason for it. I just picked out a house last time that I'm planning to settle down in, so I'll probably head back there and develop my career. Chen Jinxing smiled. The developments in J City has been going well these years. My house is there too. Oh, you're welcome to visit. Thank you. Chen Jinxing had originally planned to book her plane ticket together with his, but Xin Haoyue felt that she would be more comfortable going back alone, so she politely declined. Chen Jinxing seemed to have understood something from her rejection. In a gentlemanly manner, he said to her, take care. When you arrive, just give me a call if you need any help. Thanks. Even though Xin Haoyue thanked him, she had never given him her phone number. Chen Jinxing seemed to have disappeared as well, and never took the initiative to contact her. After arriving in J City and completing the formalities for her house, Xin Haoyue began job hunting. She was quite successful in that venture, and she was hired a few days later by a magazine publisher as a reporter, and Xin Haoyue was also brave enough to try a new career. Even though there was a lot of work, Xin Haoyue's abilities were great all round, so she was able to adapt very quickly to it. The next time she saw Chen Jinxing was in a famous restaurant in J City. That evening, the editor-in-chief of the publishing house was treating everyone for dinner. When Xin Haoyue was waiting at the hall to leave with one of her colleagues, she unexpectedly bumped into Chen Jinxing, who just happened to be leaving after dinner as well. Chen Jinxing whispered a few words to the two older chairmen in suits who were with him, and they said goodbye to him with a smile. When Xin Haoyue saw him walking towards her, she subconsciously turned to look at her colleagues, who were happily chattering away just a short distance away. As expected, he who carried an eye-catching aura of his own like Chen Xinan attracted many speculations and curious gazes around him before he even approached Xin Haoyue. On the other hand, Chen Jinxing acted completely naturally as he stood openly in front of her and asked, out with your colleagues today? Xin Haoyue didn't really dare to look at him just in case her colleagues were to try and pry some gossip out of her afterwards, so she just nodded. Yeah, we were just about to go. Oh, I had a bit to drink tonight, Chen Jinxing suddenly said to her. I couldn't refuse them earlier, so I had a bit too much. Xin Haoyue suddenly had the illusion that he was Chen Xinan. They were too alike, really much too alike. So? She asked, unsure. The alcohol level was a bit high, so I can't drive. After saying that, Chen Xinan added a question. Can you drive? Xin Haoyue nodded. Then, she looked up to see him happily tossing a set of keys at her. Xin Haoyue didn't see it, but she still caught it out of reflex. By the time the keys were laying quietly on her palm, she was stunned. She asked, what's this for? Drive me home. Xin Haoyue was speechless. You want me to drive you home? Chen Jinxing nodded. Yeah, didn't you say you knew how to drive? Isn't that great then? It's always better to have someone I know drive me home than a stranger. That's too troublesome. You should find another driver. Xin Haoyue, I helped you out so much and you can't even grant me this small request? Xin Haoyue sighed. Sure enough, it's best not to owe anyone any favors because it'll always be troublesome to pay them back. All right then, let's go. I'll drive. Seeing her compromise, Chen Jinxing smiled in satisfaction. Seeing that he was leaving first and waiting for her outside, Xin Haoyue went over to her colleagues to tell them she needed to leave first to handle some matters. Her colleagues probed. Is that your boyfriend, Haoyue? No, we're just regular friends. A regular friend won't just hand over their car keys so easily to you, would they? Xin Haoyue responded. He had some alcohol, so I'm just helping him drive. I don't believe it. Me neither. Xin Haoyue smiled. Can't help it if you don't believe me. He helped me a lot in the past, so I'm just returning the favor. Xin Haoyue left through the door under the cheering of the crowd to see Chen Jinxing waiting outside for her. When she saw him smiling at her, she couldn't help but turn her gaze away. Where's your car? Let's go. Sure. Chen Jinxing shook his head with a grin still on his face. He put his hands into his pocket and followed behind her. On the way back, Xin Haoyue saw him sitting in the passenger side with his eyes closed, as if he was really enjoying himself. When they stopped at a red light, she thought about it for a moment before asking, "Do you need some water?" "No. All right." Chen Jinxing opened his dazzling eyes that sparkled like the stars in the night sky and looked at her, seemingly wishing to speak but stopping. The green light came on. Xin Haoyue didn't pay much attention to the unspoken feelings inside of his eyes. She just kept her eyes forward and drove silently. When they arrived at their destination, Xin Haoyue looked at the huge villa and deliberated for a moment. In the end, she still decided to wake up the person beside her who could just be taking a nap, but could also be deep asleep. "Chen Jinxing, we've arrived." Then, she was quiet for a few moments. Seeing no response from him, she called out to him again. "Chen Jinxing? Chen. So his name is Chen Xinan?" "What?" Chen Jinxing slowly opened his eyes and looked at her, saying, "Can you tell me about you and him?" That voice was very light. If it wasn't for the fact that it was late at night and the world was quiet around them, and that the two of them were so close together in the limited space of this car, then Xin Haoyue would not have heard that light, inexpressible pain in his voice that was as light as a feather. "Chen Jinxing? He's identical to me in appearance, has similar interests, and even our personality is almost the same, right? You've known each other since college. You liked him and found the courage to pursue him. Since you couldn't get him, you began to avoid him. Then he fell in love with you for real, and you had to be separated from him for more than 2 years for your own work. In the end, he saved you without regard for his own life, and you realized you'd been in love with him all along. The two of you got to know each other, fell in love with each other, and then you shared a good life together after marriage. You even had a child." He kept saying everything out calmly. Xin Haoyue interrupted him with a trembling voice. How did you know?" Chen Jinxing turned his gaze outside the window and continued. "Xin Haoyue, are you sure you're living in reality?" "What do you mean?" "That book. I have it." "What?" Xin Haoyue immediately jumped in her seat and looked at him in disbelief. "I thought about it, and I guess Aunt Huang must have put the book in my room while cleaning up since she figured my granny was too old for reading and that it must have been mine. I didn't pay any attention to it when I came back since I was in a hurry to pack my luggage. So I brought it back to J City along with the rest of my books." Xin Haoyue's hand that was clenched on her seatbelt was trembling. Why are you telling me this today? I didn't realize until I came back after everything with your mother was settled." "Chen Jinxing, I want to see that book." Chen Jinxing looked at her with a heavy look. After taking her inside, he brought her to the study and pointed to the book Xin Haoyue had dreamt so long to find, saying calmly, "It's on the table. Help yourself. I'll go down to get a glass of water." "Thanks." Xin Haoyue's complexion changed slightly. Her eyes locked onto the table. With every step she took towards the table, she felt her heartbeat growing quicker. After Chen Jinxing went out of the study and was about to shut the door behind him, he looked still at that tall and slender body for a moment before finally shutting the door. He made a bet. If fate willed them to meet, and she agreed to come back with him, he would tell her the truth. So, when he bumped into her at the restaurant, his first reaction was surprise. And after that, there was endless worry. He asked her to drive him home. She agreed. So he lost. He was reluctant to say anything on the way back, even if the chance for them to spend time together was hard to come by. But as soon as he thought about the distance that would inevitably be wedged between them after she finished that book, he couldn't let go. But then, he told himself again that he never had her to begin with. All their closeness, their ability to talk about anything with each other, they were all just illusions in the end. How could her feelings for Chen Xinan compare to his own? Chen Jinxing, who was thinking all this to himself and suddenly paused on the steps. He said to himself, "You deserve this, Chen Jinxing." Naturally, Xin Haoyue was unaware of the complex activity going on inside his mind. She sat down and flipped open the book, page after page, as the familiar memories immediately began flooding back. At around 200,000 words, the book wasn't too long, but she read it very seriously for 3 hours. The strange thing is, Chen Jinxing never came up to disturb her after heading downstairs. She held her breath every time she flipped the pages. The first part of the developments in the book was the same. They mainly wrote about Sheng Wenyan and Chen Xinan's meeting and their heartfelt affections. But after Xin Haoyue was accidentally pushed down the stairs by Shi and hit her head, the plot began to change. The core of the female supporting character, Xin Haoyue, changed. She began to change. Everything felt like déjà vu. Everything was just as she experienced it. She and Chen Xinan, and all the hiding and the stumbling they encountered along the way. He had given her so much. He loved her so much that he could give his life for her. He was devoted to her, from start to end, until his death. But now, he was in that world alone, watching over their child by himself, waiting bitterly for the day where she could wake up. Xin Haoyue was deep asleep while her child bawled. None of Chen Xinan's sweet words he gave her when he waited by her beside each day could wake her. But no matter how often people tried to persuade him, he never stopped believing that she would one day wake up. The sun rose and set, year after year. Time passed unnoticed. The large living room was quiet without a single noise, with only Chen Jinxing sitting on the gray sofa with his arms folded over his chest. The warm water in the 2 glasses on the table had long since cooled. He sat there with his eyes unfocused, not looking at anything in particular. After a long time, he looked up towards the direction of the study. The door was still closed. She was still inside. A faint smile slowly emerged on his lips. Was she feeling nostalgic? Or perhaps, was she mourning her long-lost feelings and lover? Xin Haoyue wiped away her tears that had been flowing for a long time in the study. After closing the book, she saw a letter clasped between the last 2 pages. It wrote, "To Chen Junxing." Her face was blank for a long time. Finally, she picked up both the book and the letter and went downstairs. The living room was brightly lit. Sitting on the sofa, she couldn't tell what Chen Jinxing was thinking about. Xin Haoyue walked up to him and handed him the letter. With her voice still hoarse from crying, she said, "It's yours." Hearing that, Chen Jinxing looked up. First, his attention was drawn by her red and swollen eyes. "You cried again?" Xin Haoyue saw how seriously he was observing her and turned her head away awkwardly. But seeing that he continued to stare at her, she said honestly, "I just couldn't help myself for a bit." The corners of Chen Jinxing's mouth twitched a little. He didn't know how to respond to her, so he asked instead, "Is this from you?" "No, it's from the book's author. I was asking your grandmother about her when we first met." Chen Jinxing looked at the letter, but he didn't seem to have any intentions of picking it up. Xin Haoyue said, "I think you should look at it." Chen Jinxing accepted the letter. After shooting her a meaningful glance, he opened it. Words poured out over the faintly yellowed paper. Xin Haoyue could only see the title at the beginning. That person wrote, "To the one and only person I've had a secret crush on, Chen Jinxing." Chen Jinxing's eyes dimmed after he saw the first line. "To the one and only person I've had a secret crush on. Chening. Hello. I know you don't even know my name, and I'm not going to tell you my name here. It's enough for me that you know that there was once a very timid girl who once loved you. The first time I saw you, it was an evening with pouring rain. After the heavy downpour all afternoon, the color of the sky was terrible. I knew there would be few people outside at this time, so I found the courage to go to the supermarket before it was dark. After paying, I turned around and was instantly greeted by the sight of you who had come in to buy an umbrella. When I saw your handsome face, I forgot to react for a moment, but you didn't even seem to notice my presence. I know I've always had a weak presence, and I've always been very inconspicuous. I bought too much and the bag couldn't bear the weight and broke. When everything fell to the floor, you leaned over and helped me pick my things up. With blushing cheeks, I said thank you to you expectantly, and I still remember the 'you're welcome' you told me back then. That was the best-sounding voice I've ever heard. Chen Jinxing, I fell in love with you at first sight. But I have nothing to offer you. I'm not good enough for you. After a few days, I saw you taking a walk with your grandmother early in the morning. I kept my head down, and we brushed past each other. In that instant, I could feel my heart beating loud. Chen Jinxing, you gave me the feeling of love. I was scared of seeing you, but I also looked forward to seeing you every day. One time, I secretly listened in on an old person who was gossiping about you in the neighborhood. They said you were from a rich family, that your father was in a high position, also that you had been excellent since you were a young boy. They said you had a successful career despite your young age and a resounding reputation. Chen Jinxing, I felt so inferior at that moment. You see, the person I chose to love was so outstanding. I had such good judgment. But I felt deeply inferior. How could I be with you if you were so outstanding? I didn't even have the courage to talk to you. Chen Jinxing, I've already gotten used to seeing you walk past me from afar through my window. Even if I would never be able to stand openly in front of you and confess my feelings. At the very least, I want you to know that somebody in this world loved you in the past. My beloved Chen Jinxing, thank you for appearing in my life. For me to fall in love with a man like you in my life was enough for me. I wish you happiness. The me who loves you. Xin Haoyue kept observing the expression on his face, trying to discern a hint of his emotions from the subtle changes in his expression. But after reading the letter, Chen Jinxing put it back down on the table and asked her, "Where did it come from?" Xin Haoyue pointed to the book on the table beside him. The last 2 pages of the book were stuck together, and that letter was hidden inside. So this letter was written by the person who gave my grandmother this book? Xin Haoyue said, "The person who gave you the book is also the person who wrote the book." Chen Jinxing was silent for a moment. He asked, "You know each other?" Xin Haoyue shook her head at first, but then she nodded. "So, was the Xin Haoyue in the book based on you?" Chen Jinxing asked. Xin Haoyue smiled bitterly. "She hated me so much that she wrote me into the book as well. But she loved you, and it was because of that love for you that Chen Xinan was born." "That, Chen Xinan, did he really exist?" "He's always been there." Chen Jinxing looked at her. "So, what do you plan to do after seeing this book?" "I want to go back to him." "That's just a fantasy world created by someone. Even if you know it's not real, would you still want to do that?" I knew it was the world inside of the book. I've known from the very start, but I'm still so in love with Chen Xinan. I love him, and we have a child together that I'd only been able to see once in my life. I have to go back since both he and my child are waiting for me. Go back? How are you going to achieve that? I don't know, but I'll find a way. If I can get in once, I'll definitely be able to find a way to get in again. What way? I have to die. When he heard her announce that so calmly, he instantly said, Are you crazy? I wish I was, but I'm clearly so sober. Chen Jinxing, this book wasn't the book I read in the beginning. I have no idea how she could know all the changes that happened after my transmigration and even written it down. I also have no idea whether I went in after she had finished writing the book and giving it to your grandmother. Maybe she was able to travel back and forth between the two worlds before she died, but the book always existed. At the very least, it proves that everything I went through was real, even if that was in an unknown world. While speaking, Xin Haoyue looked straight at him. I want to thank you for telling me about the existence of this book tonight. Thank you for letting me find out that I still have people who love me, who are waiting for me to return. Chen Xing didn't say anything for a long time. Xin Haoyue could feel how down his mood was. After a long moment of silence, he asked, What about me then? You discovered that there are people who love you waiting for you in that world. But what about me? Did you never realize that I was waiting for you too? What? I don't want you to go back to him. If you have to use an extreme method like death, then I'll stop you. Xin Haoyue, are you sure that the person who created this world is dead, and that that world still exists? To put it simply, are you sure you'll be able to see Chen Xinan and your child if you die? When he saw that she wanted to refute him, he went on, Don't do anything stupid and stop thinking about those ridiculous things. Can't you just continue on with your life happily? Even if it's for me? Huh? The moment Xin Haoyue raised her head to look at him, her brows were knitted in a frown. You're a very special person to me. So, will you stay for me? But Chen Jinxing had no idea that he would never get the chance to say those words he was unable to say to her again. Xin Haoyue's 2 words of sorry and thank you were enough to stop his unspoken words of confession in its tracks. Chen Jinxing couldn't even remember what she said in the end. All he knew that when she left, she asked him, Can I take this book? Even if he was reluctant, he still nodded when he saw her earnest gaze. Then, she thanked him and left with the book. Half a month later, he finally learned that she went to do an on-the-spot interview for a small town where a magnitude 8 earthquake had occurred. Nobody in the publishing house was willing to take the job, so she volunteered to go. Only, everyone was busy trying to save the victims after the disaster. Unexpectedly, the aftershocks came in, killing and injuring countless people. Chen Jinxing watched the news reports silently. He could see that everything was in ruins in the disaster area, and he saw all the injured citizens and also the people who were crying as they sent away their loved ones. Then the familiar name, Xin Haoyue, appeared on the list of victims. His eyes gradually turned red, tears slowly flowing down from them. He sought help from all his contracts in hope of getting the chance to head to the disaster area himself, despite Father Chen's firm opposition. But when he saw the scene with his own eyes, all his tiny hopes were shattered. She was dead. When she died, she still held that book tightly in her hands, and that book was covered in her blood. But her expression looked so serene. When Chen Jinxing cremated her with the book, he looked at the gray sky and thought to himself, did she return to that person's side as she had wished? Maybe he'll never find the answer. All he knew was that for the first time, he had someone he wanted to stay with, and she was gone. Forever, never to return. All the friends who Chen Jinxing had come in contact with said that something wasn't too right with him these days, and those problems were reflected in his mood. It seemed that Chen Jinxing, who had always been very good with his work, was getting more and more irritable recently. That's right. Chen Jinxing himself also felt strangely irritated. It was that kind of irritability that you would never get rid of without getting a holiday to calm yourself down. He had been working on a design for a full month without any developments. The scrapped sketches were piling up like a mountain. Chen Jinxing was even at the point of wanting to use cigarettes and alcohol to ease the irritability he could not get rid of. He was so troubled that his designing wouldn't go smoothly. Chen Jinxing gulped down a mouthful of wine and said to his childhood friend, Lu Ying, do you think my well is finally running dry? All his old inspirations that made him proud seemed to have disappeared in a flash. Now he doubted himself with every single stroke, and the half-ruined products that came out were hardly worth his time. It was annoying, and it bothered him. Lu Ying nearly spat out his wine. He wiped his mouth and said, Hey man, cut the rest of the world some slack. If a divine being like you has a dried-up well, then what about everyone else? Do they not need to live then? Chen Jinxing sighed and did not answer. After observing his expression, Lu Ying said, If you ask me, I think it's because you're being too demanding of this project. That's why you're looking down on your own work. Humph, it's a pity I don't even have a full draft for my design. Lu Ying saw how gloomy he was. He widened his eyes a bit and pretended to ask casually, Hey, Great Prince Chen, it's rare for you to be so bothered about something. You're not nursing a broken heart, are you? Why would I? But halfway through trying to refute, Chen Jinqing suddenly stopped. Lu Ying grinned. Look, I thought it was weird the last time you called me. A woman who can trouble you so much, and now she's stolen your soul too. Quickly tell me, who is it? I heard from someone that she's a dancer. Couldn't be that one, right? Heard she's quite pretty too. She's dead, Chen Jinqing suddenly said while seeing him happily chattering away beside him. Lu Ying couldn't react to it for a moment. What? She's dead. He calmly repeated himself, but he himself knew that his heart hollowed out when he told him that cruel reality. His eyes felt hot and there was almost a choking sensation bubbling up inside his throat. She's dead. Yeah, she died. He wanted to get her to stay, but before he could do anything, she was gone. Lu Ying saw how off he looked and pushed him. Hey, you're joking, right? Chen Jinqing smiled bitterly. I really wish I was. Lu Ying didn't know what to say anymore. How could it be so sudden? Chen Jinqing said. Maybe it's just fate. Lu Ying finally understood that Chen Jinqing must miss her very much. Look at you, don't be so sad. What's gone is gone, but you still have to go on. I know. You should take a vacation. I'm sure you'll forget it with time. Chen Jinqing smiled but did not comment. How long, how many years would it take to forget a person? She left so freely, so unencumbered, so what was he to do? He just hated that he didn't confess sooner. Maybe if he did, then she might never think about going back to that place. Maybe if he did, she'd call and tell him before she left, and naturally he would have stopped her. He wouldn't have let her go. If he confessed, then she could be alive right now. Chen Jinqing thought that as long as someone was alive, it didn't matter even if they were thinking of someone else, because he would still protect her. But she wouldn't even give him that chance. The person he once loved would never appear before him again in this lifetime. He tried to ease his sorrows with alcohol, but that only made things worse. After going back, he looked at his dark and empty room. He turned on the lights and then the TV. There, a beautiful woman danced concentratedly on the large LCD screen. Each one of her sweet smiles seemed to dissolve into tears in his drunken days. She was a person full of resilience and perseverance. Even if she was tired, even if she cried, she would still rather carry her burdens all by herself. Even if he wanted to help her, she would never take the initiative to hold out her hand. Chen Jinqing felt that he was a disappointment. He had never experienced this in his entire life. Perhaps he was wrong to have been so self-confident in his feelings. Love wasn't something you could get just by waiting. If you loved someone, you had to work to seize the opportunity. Otherwise, the chance will never come again. He had lost her, and she would never come back. Xin Haoyue, I wish you happiness as well. To you who gave me all these feelings, I hope you can find him. As for me, I'll continue my life in this world, going back to the old days until the person who's fated for me appears, and when she shows up, she'll help me forget about all the pain and sadness you've caused me. Things don't always go perfectly, but Chen Xinan did not understand. Why would another disaster happen as soon as he welcomed his long-awaited baby son into the world? His beloved fell into a long sleep ever since the baby was born for no reason at all. None of the doctors could find a cause. A few days later, they all collectively gave him the same news. She was dead. No, she's not dead. How could she be dead? Chen Xinan had no idea how he should respond to such a ridiculous statement at the time. He just remembered Xin Chanchang telling him afterwards that he was like a feral lion, thrashing the entire ward if any doctor so much as dared to say anything bad about his wife. So be it then. His wife didn't need to stay here anyway, he thought. Who were these quacks to tell him that she was dead? She was clearly still alive. She's just asleep. He could hear her weak breaths. She wasn't dead at all. Look, she's still breathing. No matter how light it was, he could feel her feeble breathing as he watched over her at night. And that was enough. As long as she still had a hint of breath left in her, he definitely won't let anything happen to her. Chen Xinan transferred her to a new hospital, and this one had a very nice environment. However, the doctors couldn't find the cause for her coma either, but they wouldn't use the word death to describe her. They just said they will try their best to save her. But as for how large that possibility was, Chen Xinan himself was not sure. But all he had to do was have hope and to work hard. She was his beloved. How could she leave him and his son behind without so much as a word? Speaking of their son, he was very cute. The baby had her eyes and nose, but the rest of his features were almost like an exact replica of him. Everyone said the boy looked just like him. But when he was holding his son and looking at his big black eyes, all he could think about was Xin Haoyue. It would be wonderful if she could wake up and hold her child. It would be wonderful if she could wake up and argue with him about who the child resembled more. Then he would surely coax her and say that the baby looked like her. But he knew that she would definitely say the baby looked like him, because he knew that she'd always hoped for the child to resemble him more. She achieved everything she wanted, but how could she be so cruel as to leave such a small child alone? In the first dozen days the baby was born, it would always wail loudly at night. Neither Beining nor Wang Yinlin could coax him. That voice was loud and clear, and the baby's face that was red from its crying made everyone worry. As soon as Chen Xinan held him in his arms and coaxed him, he miraculously stopped crying. The elders all say it was because of their kinship. The baby must have realized that something has happened to his mother and became insecure. That's why the baby would cry all night, unable to calm down without Chen Xinan by his side. So in less than half a month, Chen Xinan, who had to watch over his wife and take care of his child, lost a lot of weight. He had no energy left to take care of work. But fortunately, Mao Xiuan was there in the subsidiary company, and Chen An was also there to help in the Chen group. So everything was going smoothly. Each day felt like years, as Chen Xinan waited for Xin Haoyue to wake up, but her eyes were always closed as she remained deep asleep. He wondered, is the reason why the doctors were never able to find the cause related to that world? Did she return? She went back to her own world after she completed her mission here, didn't she? The person he loved so deeply went back to the world she belonged and wasn't going to come back, right? Even if that were true, how could he just sit and do nothing, allowing their family of 3 to live such an unhappy life? Xin Haoyue, no matter what method I use, I'll wake you up. Chen Xinan began to look high and low for famous doctors. After seeing 2 or 3 of them, he was once again discouraged when they shrugged. When Xin Qiancheng came over to the hospital and saw him holding the sleeping child in his arms, he looked heavy-faced at Xin Haoyue, who was still unmoving on the bed, unsure what to do. Xin Qiancheng was silent for a moment before he reminded him, the child is asleep. Chen Xinan and Xin Haoyue's child hadn't been given a name yet. Chen Xinan said, I told her I would leave the naming of the baby to her, but she hasn't given the baby a name yet, so she definitely won't leave. She'll wake up. But everyone looked at each other, choosing to remain silent. So, to this day, the child still bears no name. Xin Qiancheng looked at his facial hair that he hadn't taken care of for a few days and said, you should put the child down and clean yourself up as well. No need. Xin Qiancheng sighed. He resisted the urge to swing his fist and went on. Didn't you say she's just sleeping? Are you going to let her wake up to see you like this? Chen Xinan looked quietly at him for a moment, and he suddenly scoffed. I don't even know if she'll ever wake up. Tell me, do you think she'll wake up? Xin Qiancheng did not respond, but his complexion was bad. Chen Xinan laughed. I didn't think you'd be unsure as well. How rare. But I still believe that she can wake up. Isn't he the male lead? Shouldn't he be happy with her until the end? That's right. She should. Chen Xinan quickly turned around and put the child down lightly and covering him up with a blanket before saying to Chen Qiancheng, help me look after him for now. I'll be back after going out for a bit. Where are you going? Before he could even finish speaking, Chen Xinan had already disappeared. When she saw him, she wasn't surprised in the slightest. She raised her chin and laughed proudly at him. So you're here to see me, Chen Xinan? Xin Haoyue's baby is born? Is this your doing? She shook her head. What could I do in jail? Then what happened to her? Nothing, she said casually to him. Isn't she just asleep? Chen Xinan, go back and save her with your son's blood. That might work. Only she would probably hate you when she woke up, wouldn't she? Haha, Chen Xinan, if I can't be happy, then I won't let her be happy either. This is the ending I created from sacrificing my own life and my blood. How could I give Xin Haoyue an easy time? Ha ha ha. Chen Xinan glared at her, but she was proud of herself. So, how about it? Have you decided? Chen Xinan, if you don't seize this opportunity, then you won't get another chance in the future. Xin Haoyue will never return to you. You'll be left to die alone.